so here's the systems, and I'll move on over here. On a military term, let me just make sure I know where we're at. Wait, somebody tell me what time it is? Is it 3:30? Yeah. Okay, we're good. Okay, so the unit binders, we just finished the Frankenstein unit. Let me bring this one up over here. So I've got some purchased unit materials, and so I use that as my cover. And let's see if I can do this without dumping anything. I actually leave the book inside the binder, because if I don't, what does that mean? I have no idea where it goes. Or I might do something like, oh, here, you don't have a book today, Johnny? Here, have my book that is highlighted, annotated, and probably has every quiz and test question, marked for you. And so you don't have to do any thinking, okay? So I keep the book right there with it. And then right here, I've got, right now, this disc is all of the files that I've created that are associated in any way with Frankenstein. And just to look impressive, I even printed out an index just so you could look at it and be impressed. All right, remembering I'm not a naturally organized person, but I look at that and I go, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And then just last week, I showed some clips from the old 1985 movie Mask with Cher about the kid who had elephantitis, because part of what I wanted to do with the kids is show them the contrast between the creature who had nobody who cared. And then in the movie Mask, you have Rocky, who not only has a mother who cares for him, but then this blind girl who cannot see him, has no prejudices towards him. And so I have 3 short movie clips. Well, I know they're on my computer, but what happens if my computer crashes, or I don't take this computer that particular day? They're now here. Now, I've had some people tell me, well, that's wasteful. Yes, it's wasteful. Okay, because next year I'll probably burn a whole new CD with everything that's current then. But how much are CDs? 20 cents? All right, maybe $1 if I'm doing a DVD. All right, for how many of you would you pay $1 not to lose things that are important to you? All right, this is cheap. I'm really sorry about the landfill problem, but that's not entirely my responsibility. Now, I didn't use this article. This was an article that was given to me. It's about an actor who played Frankenstein early on. I don't use this one extensively, but this is what the kids think of when they think of Frankenstein. So it allows me to tap into prior knowledge, prior experience. The kids, the reason I keep, well, there's many reasons I keep doing Frankenstein. One of them being that I read it right around Columbine, and it helped me understand what happens when an innocent becomes a revenge seeker. But anyways, but this is what the kids think of when they think of Frankenstein. I've got my reading schedule. I've got the calendar. This is from this year. And so when it's time for me to plan this unit next year, I'll look back and see what I did this year, because it's sitting right here. And I generally will keep each year just so I can see what worked, what didn't work. Am I going to lengthen it? Am I going to shorten it? I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Oh, this was, we're putting the creature on trial this year. And so this was the little survey I gave the students to find out what part they'd like to play. Did they want to be on the prosecution? Did they want to be on the defense? Did they want to be a witness? That sort of thing. And then the listing of what they ended up being. So basically, any piece of paper I produced that had to do with this unit. Now, do you notice any tabs on these? No. Labels? No. And so what's going to happen next year, when it's about 2 to 3 weeks before my Frankenstein unit, I'm going to sit and lovingly, I'm going to go through and touch everything again. And I'm going to remind myself, how did this work? How did it not work? Oh, this was dumb. Oh, I really like this. I should emphasize that. So I don't need to have a little tab on each one of those, because I'm just going to go through and visually, knowing my students from, that year, decide what works for them and what doesn't. I don't just go through and lockstep do the same thing every single year. And then what do I have here? Oh, these are my quizzes and my answer keys. I put the quizzes on the back side, and then I put the answer keys on the front side, because I'll just pull this out and hand it to my reader, or if I'm doing the grading, I'll just pull it out, do the grading, and put it back in. Now, these are my best friends. These are Double Pocket by Avery, Double Pocket, and what else do you notice about them? They are clear. If this was something that I couldn't see all the way through, I'd be dead in the water. I would, even though it's labeled up here, I would still really have no clue what's going on. So far, everything you've seen in here is clear. I can see what's there. It's not the label I need to be able to see it. And I committed a crime on this one. You notice no red markings. I need to go back and take care of that, because my goal is to establish the point values for every question once. Because if you've ever graded a stack of quizzes, and in your brain you knew what points you were giving, and then a day later, a week later, the kid who didn't take the quiz, I'm getting nods here, takes it. I would love to say I remember exactly how many points they were worth, and I don't. In fact, one of the things I'm doing this year is each question, I'm actually putting how many points they're worth in the question. And that has two things. One, it tells me when I'm grading, or my reader who's grading, but it also tells the kids, is this a 1-point quickie? Just give something that resembles a quick, correct answer of all the options, give one word or phrase and move on. Or if it's worth 4, oh, you might be looking at sentences, paragraphs. Make sure that when I go through, I can go +1, +1, +1, +1, and you can get all your 4 points. So I'm finding it's useful for both reasons. All right, so that's all the quizzes. And then I've got my, the professional unit plans from Prestwick House, I think it is where I get a lot of those. And then what's back here? Oh, this is the AP unit, so there's a lot of practice stuff in the back, which this year I ended up not using. And I probably am going to have to evaluate. If I don't use them for a few more years, I'll probably go ahead and use them to start a fire in our fireplace at home, because I still have the digital files. The digital files for those are here on this CD. I just was, when I first started teaching AP 4 years ago, I was so nervous I bought everything in sight, because that was going to make me a good teacher, right? Buying things is what makes you good. And so let's see, what else can I show you? This is new, and this one is still in process, so I'll show these. Taught 12 Angry Men for the first time this year, and taught it to a bunch of sophomores. Went over wonderfully. They really, really, really enjoyed it. One of the things I did that I was really proud of, how many of you are familiar with 12 Angry Men? Black and white with Henry Fonda. Oh, if you've not seen it, rent it over Thanksgiving. You will not regret it. Great, great movie. But I wanted to read it with the students first. In fact, I moved the tables in my room, so we were kind of in a jury table situation, and I forbade anyone from getting sick. Because if you're missing a juror, it really ruins things. And I really wanted them to associate the character, because they're called juror 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They don't have names. So I wanted the name of the student to become associated with that particular juror. And then one of the things that struck me the night before is that I went through, and on IMDb, I was able to find photos, classic photos of each juror, and then I put the juror description, which is in the script. So the kids were able to go through, oh, they're back, it's the second page is behind it. The kids were able to go through and go, oh, that's me. And they were more easily able to remember who the jurors were. Okay, this took me about an hour to do, getting all the spacing correct. Do you think I want to do that again next year? I mean, this is not something I enjoy. Absolute zero enjoyment. What I enjoyed was the fact that it worked for the kids, that it made the learning experience so much better. They did not lose track of the characters. I felt like an absolutely fabulous teacher for that. I was just so, I was thrilled that I thought of it before we started rather than partway through. Now, I don't mind doing that. I don't mind saying, guys, I realize we have a problem, I'm going to solve it, because then, but then they're like, Ms. Gregory, why didn't you think of this to start with? Well, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect, okay? But this time I did, so I definitely want to keep it. And let's see. Oh, this is a writing assignment I did. What's the rest of all this? Oh, study guides. Study guides, and again, the answer keys with all the points marked out, and probably in the back. And notice these aren't labeled yet. I do need to get those little tabs in there, and probably somewhere Christmas vacation, I'll hire my daughter to go in, and I'll give her a list of tab names to make for me her beautiful handwriting, and I'll insert them. But is it functional without them? Yeah, okay, because if all else fails, I can look at it and go, oh, this was the quiz. Oh, vocab. I did pull vocab from this one that we did. All right, and you can see I used to store all my movies together in one place. Where's the movie? Right here. Right here. And we ripped it. So it's also on the computer somewhere. I'm not selling it. I'm not passing it along to everybody I know. But, you know, what happens when this gets scratched on day 2? And we need to see it for 2 more days. So I don't have a problem with ripping so that I have a backup. And again, my copy of the script is just sitting right here, which works with almost all the books that I teach. I don't teach a lot that are real, real thick. And a little note from one of my students this year, I wanted them to find out what $2,700 in 1955, 27,000, 2,700. One of the characters said we watched the interviews at the end of the movie, and one of them said each actor got paid something like $2,700 to make a movie. And so I just was curious what it would be in today's terms. So he looked it up for me and left me the note for that. All right, so that's 12 Angry Men. I've got my Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. The one thing that's missing from this that I thought of, and I wasn't able to do it this year because I thought of it last year and I didn't act on it immediately. My students have gotten into the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner earlier and faster when they start finding the connection between that poem and what well-known newer movie series do you think? Pirates of the Caribbean. All right, and so not this year I forgot, and so I couldn't do it, and it wasn't in the binder. But 2 years ago I brought the music out, and we started when they were doing some early reading. I played some of the theme music as they were coming into class, and they were like, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" And suddenly, and the music's perfect. I mean, it just couldn't be a better match. And so, but I thought to myself, oh, burn a CD of all the theme song music. Oh yeah, that'd be a good idea. Did I do it? No. So that's one of the things on my list of things to do with that. I do Socratic circles sometimes, and this is my Socratic circle binder, which is the least exciting of all of them. This is the just stick it in there and make it look pretty later binder. And so these are the forms that I use when I'm doing a Socratic circle. Again, they're just in sheet protectors. And everything else is in the double pocket ones, or actually has them as dividers for no good reason. I'm going to actually change them out because these are expensive. Okay, I will admit, they don't give those away for free. But you can see it's got the article. I try to keep the article that I annotated because I want to be able to demonstrate for the students what I'm looking for, what real annotation is. And then anything we produce as a class. This was the questions that my last class came up with. It was 2 years ago. We were doing a unit on Hamlet, and Ted Kennedy had just passed. And I saw some brother connections, some legacy connections, some political connections, and I also just wanted them to be aware of who Teddy Kennedy was, which most of them had no clue. And so they developed questions, and all of these questions ended up translating really well into our discussion of Hamlet and into themes and motifs. Now, this red list isn't really useful to me. I realized if I want to copy or use this in the future, I've got to substitute it for a white one. But have I lost the actual content yet? I actually do have the words we came up with. So this is still better than the olden days when I would have absolutely nothing. And I don't think there's a whole lot exciting or anything really worthwhile to show off. And you guys will be welcome later on to come and page through anything that you want to. This one is a work in process because we're in the midst of changing textbooks. This is just my catch-all that goes with the English 2 book. I always end with a journey presentation that the students have to do because so many of the books that we've looked at, books or short stories we've done have to do with the classic hero's journey. And so my basic information and the rubric is here. And then you can see how far this goes back. What does this look like? Anybody still use overheads? This is a great poem that I use that I have not yet transferred onto a PowerPoint slide, so I haven't used it for a while, but I haven't lost it, which is still my sign of success. I actually took a student textbook and chopped it up so that I have the particular stories in here. It was a damaged textbook. So those are hanging out in here. What else? Quizzes. More short stories. The Secret Love Lives of Teenage Boys. All right, this one I do with a short story called To Catch the Moon. It's about a young man who's lost his mother. He's just in the midst of teenage angst, and he sees a beautiful young lady. She happens to be wearing a white dress. It's one of these very symbolic, lovely stories. And before we read it, I have them read the Secret Love Lives of Teenage Boys, and we use the eye clickers for this one because let me guarantee when we read this one, if I want an opinion out of any male in the class, they are not raising their hand at all for that one. But also I want the girls to keep their mouths shut, so I use the eye clickers to get something started, and then I take hands only because that discussion can be interesting. For those of you who may not have seen it, basically only 20% of guys are jerks, and the other 80% are very, very deep. In fact, much deeper than many girls of the similar age. All right, what else is in here? We're about to come to my favorite one, unless I took it out and didn't put it back in. Oh, here we go. Copy of If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. All right, now my children are 18 and 20. My copy of this is no longer readily available, plus the copy they grew up with is hardback, has no cover on it, and is covered with all sorts of stuff I don't want to take into the classroom. And I use this before I teach Bradbury's Sound of Thunder, because what I want to do is I want a cause and effect, a chain, a domino effect. And it's so funny. Because, you know, you think teenagers, oh, they don't want a children's book. I bring this out. They are so excited that we are having Mrs. G's story hour for 2-3 whole minutes. It doesn't take long to read. But again, this is probably not the most elegant way to store it, but I've had it available to me for the last 5 years whenever I needed it to be available. And everything else in here is really, really boring. All right, I think that's enough on binders. Now I'll just show off real quick. My Hamlet binder, after going to Ashland, Oregon a couple years ago and doing the Shakespeare in the classroom, I brought everything back. And that one I did go nuts with. I'd spent a huge amount of money. I think there is a correlation sometimes between how much you invest and then how detailed you go with it. But it was also very vital for me to make note of how the students responded. And so I've got a lot of notes of that. And then absolutely everything I did is on this thumb drive. Now that thumb drives are getting cheaper, I probably could just burn it to a CD, but I think there's some video on that one. So anyways, if you're at all interested, you're welcome to come look at this one later. All right, so that's unit binders, and the next thing is really not going to be all that different. That's what the basic materials look like. You can see my Frankenstein unit. It really was a wreck, and so I did kind of spread things out and then put them back together again. And you've already seen walk through it. It probably took me about 20 minutes in about 2 sessions. That one I did discipline myself a little bit more. Unit boxes. Best example of that is going to be my Fahrenheit 451, because I've just got too much. I'm a big Gregory fan, so I'm just going to start pulling things out just so you can see the kind of things I keep. Audiobook. I have lots of kids who do much better with reading if they have the audiobook. Was so excited when the graphic novel came out. Actually, was horrified when the graphic novel came out. Then I found out Gregory himself had a hand in it, and I thought, why not? If some kids who weren't going to read to begin with go through the graphic novel and get something more out of the story, I don't leave it on my bookshelf. I have this tucked aside for kids that I might want to have them read it first, or I just might want to make it available to them. War of the Worlds. I like to do this with the kids just to point out to them how powerful radio was. They don't understand that. They don't understand that people used to sit around and listen to the radio and really believe what they heard was real. My teacher's copy, falling apart badly, full of my notations. One of the world's worst movies. Oh my goodness, it is so bad, but I hang on to it. Every now and then I'll show a scene. There's a few scenes that are really worth it, and sometimes I'll loan it out to a student who just wants a good laugh. Perfection Learning does have a nice unit on it, and I've had this for so many years, so it's a great place to store it. And then this is, I think I'm all right. This has got short stories and some biographical information on Ray Bradbury. This is a folder of student artwork associated with Fahrenheit 451. And then the binders in here are unit materials, reading response questions, and quizzes. I've actually had to divide them up. I don't make all the students do the reading response questions. In fact, we're going to be starting this unit after Thanksgiving break. I gave the book out to anybody who wanted it, because I know some kids, if you chop it up, you ruin it for them. I mean, how many of us really want somebody to tell us how many pages to read per night? And yet, as teachers, we're supposed to have the class doing something sort of together in some way. And so I told the kids, if you're the kind who wants to just curl up in a chair and a fire and a mug of hot chocolate, blaze through the book, and then you'll do it a second time with the rest of us. But the reading response questions, I got real detailed when I developed them, because I found that my students who weren't catching the nuances, they weren't catching the symbolism, they weren't catching the motifs, they told me we really liked the reading response questions. The kids who were naturally getting them on their own were like, Mrs. Gregory, that was so terrible. So I give 3 quizzes, and as soon as they show me they can get 85%